The night Elise found out the truth, she was standing in her own kitchen, holding a dish towel, listening through the wall. She hadn't meant to overhear. She'd come downstairs for a glass of water because she couldn't sleep. She hadn't been sleeping well for weeks, though she hadn't let herself think too hard about why. The kitchen light was off. The back door was cracked open the way Hugh always left it when he went out for a smoke, and the voices drifted in from the patio clear as anything. Her mother-in-law's voice first. Lorraine, that low, certain voice that always made Elise feel like she was being evaluated. The timing works perfectly, Lorraine was saying. Once her parents finalize the sale, we move on the renovation loan. Hugh's name is already on the account. A pause. Then Hugh. She's going to find out eventually. By the time she does, it won't matter. The money will already be tied up in the property. Elise stood very still. The dish towel was in both hands. She wasn't breathing. And Stacy? Hugh said. Another pause, longer this time. Stacy's situation is your problem to manage, Lorraine said. I've told you that. Keep it quiet until after. Elise didn't move for a long time after she heard the back door swing shut. She stood in the dark kitchen, in the house she and Hugh had bought together 4 years ago, in the city she'd moved to for him, and she thought, how long? That was the question that came first. Not why or how could he. Just how long has this been going on? She'd met Hugh Calloway at a mutual friend's cottage weekend up near Perry Sound. This was 6 years ago. He was funny and unhurried, and he made her feel like the most interesting person in the room, which was a new experience for Elise, who had spent most of her 20s feeling slightly out of step with everything. She was 31 when they got married. She'd thought she was lucky. His mother, Lorraine, had smiled warmly at the wedding. She'd given a toast about family and new beginnings. Elise had cried a little. The problems didn't start right away. They crept in slowly, the way cold does when there's a gap in the weather stripping. You don't notice until the whole house is different. Lorraine started coming by unannounced about 8 months after the wedding. At first it was once a week, then more. She had opinions about how the house was kept, about what Hugh ate, about the fact that Elise was still working full-time at the architecture firm instead of being present. A phrase Lorraine used often, in a tone that managed to imply Elise was failing at something without ever specifying what. Hugh would shrug it off. That's just how she is. She means well. Elise had believed him. For a long time, she'd kept believing him because it was easier than the alternative. Her parents, her mom, Carol, and her dad, Ron, had noticed before she admitted it to herself. Her mom had said once, carefully, over the phone, "You seem tired, Elle, a different kind of tired." Elise had changed the subject. Her parents were selling a piece of land near Barrie that her grandfather had left them. It had been sitting there for years, more liability than asset, and a developer had finally made a serious offer. Elise knew about it. She'd helped her dad review the paperwork. It was a significant amount of money, life-changing for 2 retired people in their late 60s. She hadn't told Hugh the exact figure. She wasn't sure why, some instinct she hadn't listened to. Now she understood the instinct. She went back upstairs. She lay down next to Hugh and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. In the morning she made coffee. She set a mug on Hugh's side of the counter and watched him come into the kitchen in his work clothes, relaxed, easy, like a man with nothing to hide. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she said. She watched him pour the coffee. She watched him check his phone. She thought about the voice she'd heard on the patio. The money will already be tied up in the property. "Your mom called last night?" she said. He glanced up. Just for a second, a flicker. "Yeah, quick check-in. Nothing major." "Okay," Elise said. She went to work. She didn't confront him right away. She knew herself well enough to know that if she said something before she understood the full shape of it, she'd give him the chance to minimize it, explain it away, make her feel like she'd misunderstood. Hugh was good at that. Not in a cruel way. That was the thing that had always disarmed her. He wasn't cruel. He just had a way of reframing things until the original version dissolved. So instead, she started paying attention. She went through the joint account statements when Hugh was at hockey practice on Thursday evenings. She found a series of transfers she didn't recognize. Not large amounts, not alarming on their own, but consistent, every few weeks, going to an account she'd never seen before. She looked up the account name. It took her a few days and a call to their bank, where she spoke to a woman named Paula, who was professionally patient with Elise's careful, measured questions. The account was a holding account, attached to a numbered company. The company was registered to Hugh and Lorraine jointly. Elise sat in her car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes. Then she called her friend Britt, who was a paralegal and who had always been direct with her in a way Elise had sometimes found abrasive and now found like oxygen. "Tell me everything," Britt said. "Don't leave anything out." Elise told her. Britt was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, here's what you're going to do. She didn't move fast. That was the thing Elise was most proud of later. When she thought back on those weeks, she didn't panic. She had spent years half panicking about small things, about whether she was good enough at being a wife, at being a daughter-in-law, at being present in the particular way Lorraine had always made her feel she wasn't. She'd wasted so much energy on that. This time she was calm. She documented everything. Britt helped her understand what she was looking at and what it meant. She called a family law lawyer, a woman named Sherry who practiced out of an office in Midtown, and who had the efficient, unsurprised manner of someone who had heard every version of this story and was here to help, not to judge. She explained her options. She explained what was and wasn't marital property in Ontario. She explained that the numbered company was traceable, that the transfers were documented, and that the planned use of her parents' land sale proceeds, if Elise could establish that Hugh had intended to direct those funds without her knowledge, would be relevant. He hasn't done it yet, Elise said. The sale closes next month. Then we have time, Sherry said. Elise called her mom that evening. She sat at her kitchen table and she told Carol everything. The conversation through the back door, the transfers, the numbered company, Stacy, whose last name she still didn't know. Her mom was quiet for a long time. Elle, she said finally, why didn't you tell us sooner? Elise thought about that. I kept thinking I was wrong, she said. I kept thinking I was making something out of nothing. You were never wrong, her mom said. I want you to know that. She told her dad the next day. Ron didn't say much, that wasn't his way, but he said, you let me know what you need and I'll be there. It was enough. The thing about Stacy took a little longer to untangle. Elise had been turning the name over in her mind since she'd first heard it on the patio. Stacy's situation is your problem to manage. She'd run through explanations, a colleague, a neighbor, someone from Hugh's past, and each time she'd arrived at the same place she didn't want to arrive at, she found out in the most ordinary way. A name on a screen, a number she didn't recognize, a late-night text that Hugh had left open when he went to the bathroom and that she saw without meaning to. Can we please just talk? I don't know what to tell her. Elise set the phone back down on the nightstand exactly as she'd found it. She lay awake that night, thinking about all the small things she'd explained away over the past 2 years. The evenings where he was home late from work, the weekends where he was distracted and a little too apologetic about it. The way he'd been more attentive than usual in recent months, more careful with her, like someone managing something. She'd thought it meant he was trying. She'd been grateful. She went into the bathroom and ran the cold tap and held her wrists under it and looked at herself in the mirror for a while. Then she went back to bed and did not let him know she'd seen anything. She gave herself 2 more weeks. Sherry had some things to prepare. Britt had helped her open a separate account and start moving her direct deposit. Elise had spoken to her firm's HR department about her salary and her benefits, quietly, carefully, framed as general questions about the employee assistance plan. She'd looked at apartments. She'd found a place in the annex, a 1-bedroom in a building with a super who answered the phone on a street lined with maples, and she'd signed the lease and kept the papers in her desk at work. She wasn't running. She was stepping off a ledge she'd been standing on for years, knowing exactly where she intended to land. The only thing she hadn't decided was how the conversation would go, whether to confront him with everything or say nothing until the paperwork was in order. Sherry's advice was to wait. Britt's advice was to say what she needed to say for herself regardless of the strategy. She thought about it for a long time. In the end, she chose the version that was true to herself. It was a Sunday. Hugh's mother was coming for dinner, which was routine now. Lorraine had inserted herself into their Sunday evening so gradually that Elise could no longer remember when it had become fixed. She'd made a roast. The table was set. Lorraine arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine she'd already opened in the car, which was something she did, and which Elise had spent years not knowing how to address. They sat down. Lorraine talked about the neighborhood and about a renovation she was planning on her own house, and Hugh refilled glasses, and Elise listened, and for a moment she thought about what it would have been like if none of this had been happening, if this had just been a difficult mother-in-law, and a husband who needed better boundaries, and a marriage that was salvageable. She thought about it, and then she put it down. I want to talk about the numbered company, Elise said. The table went quiet. Hugh's face did something complicated. Lorraine's face did something else. A kind of smoothing over, the particular composure of someone who has rehearsed being caught. I know about the account, Elise said. I know about the plan for my parents' property sale. I know about Stacy. She paused. I'm not here to have a fight. I just want you both to know that I know, Elise. Hugh started. I've already spoken to a lawyer, she said. The transfers are documented. The company registration is traceable. My parents have been advised not to transfer any funds to accounts connected to this household until further notice. Lorraine set down her fork. This is a misunderstanding. It isn't, Elise said. She was surprised by how steady her voice was. She'd expected to feel more anger, more grief. What she felt instead was a strange and unfamiliar clarity, like a window she hadn't known was dirty had just been cleaned. I'm moving out at the end of the month. My lawyer will be in touch about next steps. Tonight I just wanted to have dinner. Nobody said anything. Elise picked up her fork and ate her roast. Lorraine stood up halfway through the meal and said she had a headache and left. Hugh sat across from Elise and didn't speak for a long time, and when he finally said her name she looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who had been careless with something he hadn't understood the value of. I'm sorry, he said. She could tell he meant it, in the incomplete way people mean things when they're sorry to be caught. I know, she said, and she finished her dinner. Moving out was quieter than she'd expected. She took a Friday off work, and her dad drove down from Barrie with his truck, and they loaded boxes while Hugh was at the office. She'd told him the date, given him the chance to be there, and he'd chosen not to be, which told her something. Her mom met them at the new apartment with a cooler of food and spent 2 hours helping Elise arrange the kitchen the way she liked it, which was not the way any kitchen in the last 4 years had been arranged, because Lorraine had always had opinions. This is a good place, her mom said, standing in the middle of the small living room with afternoon light coming through the front window. I think so too, Elise said. She didn't hear from Hugh for almost 2 weeks. When she did, it was a brief text, his lawyer's name, and a request that all further communication go through them. She forwarded it to Sherry and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like her life had edges again, like she could see where it began and ended. She didn't think of it as a revenge story later, when she tried to make sense of what had happened. Revenge implies you've taken something, and what she felt she'd done was more like recovering something she'd set down and then walked away from without realizing. She had walked very far. She had been gone a long time. The apartment in the annex was small. It had a maple trees outside the front window and a radiator that knocked sometimes at night, and a kitchen that was entirely hers. She kept the bedroom tidy, and the living room slightly less so. She started working longer hours, not because she had to, but because she found she loved her work and had been apologizing for that love for years. Her parents came to visit in November. Her dad stood in the living room and looked out the window and said, "Good street." Her mom brought soup. On the night they left, Elise sat in her kitchen alone and ate leftover soup and thought about the version of herself who had been standing in a dark kitchen 6 months ago, holding a dish towel, barely breathing. She thought, I heard you. She thought, I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. Then she washed her bowl and turned out the light and went to bed, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept the whole night through.